Hello friends, welcome to Storytime here at MissionViewfinder. Today I have another mission story for you, and this story is about Eric B. Hare. Now, we can call him Dr. Eric B. Hare, but he wasn't actually a doctor. And as you get to know more about him, if you've ever read any of his books, you probably know that he was actually called by the local people that he worked with, the people that he worked with were Karen people, who a lot of them have actually come into Thailand. They mostly live in Myanmar, but there's a lot of them in Thailand. And these people called him Dr. Rabbit because they wanted to know what to call him, and when they tried to explain what a hare was, it just didn't really make sense. I mean, they didn't have any difference between hare and a rabbit, so he was called Dr. Rabbit. Now, as I said, he wasn't a real doctor, he was actually just a nurse. And so there was a lot of things that he learned how to do that were beyond a regular nurse's skills, but there were a lot of things he still couldn't do at the clinic that he was working at. And one day, there was a doctor who came, a real doctor who came to the clinic. And he was going to be there for 3 weeks of his vacation, which was a very sacrificial thing to do. And he worked just night and day to do surgeries, to fix broken bones. He took care of hernias, he took care of cataracts. He did so many things, and the people were just oohing and awing because it was like so amazing. Well, one day, a couple weeks or so into his time there were two men who came. And one of them was more middle-aged, the other one was an older man. And the older man said, "There's a lady, my daughter, and this man's wife, who her arms and her legs are as thin as bamboos, and her stomach is as big as a buffalo." Now, that sounds pretty bad. But as Dr. Rabbit explained that to the real doctor, the doctor who was there visiting, the doctor began to ask questions, and he decided this was probably a watery cyst. And so he told Dr. Rabbit, "I've got the things to do it. It shouldn't be that complicated. Let's do the surgery." And so he said, "Tell the men to bring her today." And so Dr. Rabbit told the men, and they're like, "Today? We can't come today." And they're like, "We've got to go home. We've got to get like wagons to bring her. We've got to do this different stuff." Well, turns out they also wanted to sacrifice to the spirits. And essentially they ended up leaving saying, "We'll come as fast as we can." Well, they knew the doctor only had 5 more days there, but with the ways of the spirit worshippers, like, you have to sacrifice to the spirits before you can do anything. You have to make sure it's favorable. And so they sacrificed, and they didn't come, and they didn't come. And finally Dr. Rabbit told the doctor, "They're going to come about a week after you leave. What do I do?" And so the doctor explained what he could do to help relieve some of the fluid, and then he said, "You're going to have to try to get them to a doctor in the city to actually have it removed." So sure enough, like 5 days after the doctor left, the two men showed up. And they're like, we've got her. She's only 2.5 miles down the river." And Dr. Rabbit's like, "The doctor's gone." And they're like, "He's gone? What do you mean? We're late?" He's like, "Yeah, you're 5 days late." And they're like, "Well, call him on the thunder wire," which is telegraph, and tell him to come back on the lightning wire, which is like the electric line. Anyway, they have interesting ways of saying things. But essentially Dr. Rabbit was like, "I could call him, but he can't come back. He's halfway across the Bay of India by now." And so the men were like, "Well, can't you do it?" And so Dr. Rabbit explained, "I can do a little bit, but I can't actually remove it. It'll come back. I can relieve it a little bit though." And so he went and got his supplies. He went with the men. And when they got to the house, they just kind of stood to the side and let him go up into the house. And he was about to ask where the lady was when he saw her. And he was just like, his eyes were bugging out. He was like, this lady is exactly as they described her. Her arms and her legs were as thin as bamboos, and her abdomen was just huge. So he sat down next to her, and she was just sure he was the doctor, and she's just like so happy to see him. And he got to work, and an hour later he had drained 4 gallons and 3 quarts, so almost 5 gallons of liquid off of this. And as he was done and everything, he went outside and he talked to them, and he told them, "Now you go tell her I'm not the real doctor, and that it's gonna come back. It's not really taking care of him." They're like, "No, we can't tell her that. You go back and tell her." Both the father and the husband were just like, "We can't tell her that." So Dr. Rabbit went back up into the house, and he had to sit down and tell this lady, and it was really hard for him to do, that he wasn't the real doctor, that what he had done was only temporary, and that it was all just going to come back. It was going to get worse again. And he told her that possibly in another year the doctor would come back, but he didn't know for sure. And the lady, like, just looking into her eyes, he had seen so much joy, and here it was just crushed. She was so crushed. And she just stared into space for a moment, and then she said, 12 more moons, right? You said 12 more moons the doctor will come back? He said, maybe. I can't guarantee it. And she said, I've been here on my back for 7 years. I can lay here for 12 more moons or 12 more months. And she said, go back and tell your doctor that I'll be here waiting for him next year. I'm waiting for 12 more moons for him to come back and do the surgery. So Dr. Rabbit went home and he wrote a letter to the doctor who had come. And that night, he just couldn't sleep. He couldn't get this lady off of his mind. And so he decided he was going to go into the city the next day and find the surgeon and talk to him and see if he could do this surgery. And so the next day he told his wife, you take care of the mission station for a couple days, I've got to go into the city. So he went into the city and he talked to the surgeon, and the surgeon was very open and interested in doing the surgery, but he said, you have to promise me one thing. If you bring her, you have to stay with her the entire time, because these people, these village or jungle people, are so scared that we can't do much to help them a lot of times. And so Dr. Rabbit said, it's okay, I'll stay with her. And so Dr. Rabbit went back and he told the family, and the lady looked at him and she said, but I don't know how to speak Burmese or English, and they speak Karen. And so she was worried about not being able to speak the language, but Dr. Rabbit said, don't worry, I'll be with you. And she said, but I don't know how to get there. He said, don't worry, I know how to get there. And then she said, if you promise you'll be with me, she said, it'll be okay. And he said, I promise, I'll be with you. And so her fears were dispelled, and they packed up and they took her. And 2 days later, Dr. Rabbit was standing there with her in the operating room. And she said, I'm not afraid as long as you are here with me. And so Dr. Rabbit was there the whole time. He watched as the doctor did the surgery, and he took out this huge multiple watery cyst and set it on the scale. It was 49 pounds. That's like 18 or 19 kilos. It's incredibly heavy. And so the doctor sewed the lady back up. What was left of her, as Dr. Rabbit put it, was mostly skin and bones because she was so thin. And Dr. Rabbit sat there and waited for her to wake up. And as she started waking up, she looked and she's like, you still there? And he said, yeah, I'm still here. And then she took her hand to try to feel where her cyst had been. And it startled her because it was gone. And she's like, is it gone? Is it really gone? And he said, yes, it's gone. It's gone for good. It's not coming back. And the look in that woman's eyes, as she just looked at him, there were tears streaming down her face, and she said, thank you, thank you, thank you. And Dr. Rabbit went and told the surgeon, and the surgeon had tears coming down his eyes. And Dr. Rabbit went back home and he wrote a letter to the doctor who had come, and he told him thank you, told him about the lady and the experience and how she'd had the surgery, and she was, within a month or two, she was walking around her village and everyone was just amazed. And you know, that story to me is just, it's such a picture of who God is. As I watch how Dr. Rabbit was just there with the woman through every part of the operation and everything. And because of that, she wasn't afraid. It was a huge deal. You could say it was an experience that turned her life upside down. And the results were really good, but it was still scary. But God was with her. And you know, friends, I think a lot of us, we're going to have a lot of our lives being turned upside down before things get better. And I mean before Jesus comes. There's going to be a lot of that. But let's remember that just like Dr. Rabbit was there with that woman through the whole thing, we can know that God is there the whole time. Doesn't matter how crazy things get, that's when He's the nearest to us. He's always there. He knows where we're going. He knows what to say. And He'll be with you, friends. He will always be with you. So I hope that story is an encouragement to you just like it was to me. Thank you for joining us, friends. God bless.